Laughter rang out like a blade slicing through the room. Why is she still alive? A woman's voice, light but sharp enough to tear Evelyn Parker's dignity to shreds, cut the air. She stood just outside the doorway, a tray of freshly baked peach cobbler in her hands, the warm sweetness still lingering. Her body froze, yet her legs carried her inside as if she had heard nothing at all. The dining room glowed under golden light. The family gathered around the long table. Melissa, her daughter-in-law, started when she saw Evelyn, then pressed her lips into a thin smile of strained politeness. "Oh, you came, Mother. No one expected you." Evelyn nodded, placing the tray down. No one reached to take it. She quietly sat on a folding chair at the far end of the table, her back straight, her eyes drifting over the scene. Daniel, her son, raised a glass of beer. To family. Glasses clinked together, laughter sparkled, but not a single glance turned in her direction. The grandchildren darted past, skirts and sleeves flying, not bothering to call out Grandma. Evelyn remembered their tiny hands clutching hers each time they crossed a busy street. She gave a faint smile. Perhaps they had already forgotten. Melissa came closer, leaning down, her smile stiff. "Do you want something to eat?" Evelyn shook her head gently. The younger woman turned away too quickly, as though relieved of a burden. Evelyn remained until the end of the meal, quietly stacking plates, wiping the table, folding chairs. No one paid her notice. When the lights dimmed, she carried out the empty tray alone, stepping silently into the night. The next morning, the familiar kitchen was steeped in silence. Evelyn poured coffee into an old porcelain cup and sat at the table where Daniel had once struggled over schoolwork. Back then, he was a skinny boy with messy hair, always looking up to her for help with hard math problems. Now that boy had grown into a man who endured her presence like a shadow. Evelyn sighed, opened the cabinet, and pulled out a folder. Documents lay clear before her. The house Daniel now lived in, she had paid $40,000 from her retirement fund as the deposit. Yet every line bore his name, not one mentioned hers. Pain spread through her chest, but she did not collapse. She reached for the phone and dialed Gloria, an old friend who had once worked at a law office. That afternoon, in a home fragrant with lemon and mint, Gloria read through the file carefully before looking up. "You gave it away outright, Evelyn. It's theirs now." But she paused. "You can still control the rest. Your accounts, your will, your power of attorney. Don't believe you are powerless." Evelyn gripped the sheet of notes tightly. For the first time in years, clarity shone in her eyes. That evening, Evelyn sat alone in her kitchen. No music, no television. She laid a blank page on the table, wrote Daniel Parker's name in trembling script, then drew a single firm line straight through it. The next day, she changed the locks on her front door. The young locksmith bowed politely, asking no questions. Evelyn held the cold new keys in her hand, solid and certain. That night, she slept in rare peace. No longer did she wait for the shrill ring of the phone. No longer did she cling to vague hope. When Daniel came, he knocked hard, his voice urgent. "Mother, why did you do this? I didn't mean anything by it." Evelyn sat in her living room, watching his shadow through the glass panel. She did not open. She did not respond. She had learned. Silence carried more weight than 1,000 words of reproach. A message arrived from Melissa. "We didn't mean it. Don't overthink." Evelyn smiled faintly and pressed delete. She would no longer keep their excuses as keepsakes. Late that night, Ruby, her 16-year-old granddaughter, called. Her voice trembled. "Grandma, are you still angry with me?" "At the library that day, I pretended not to see you." Evelyn stayed quiet for a long time. Inside her, the frozen river cracked slightly. "Do you want to see me?" she asked at last. "Only you, no one else." On the other end, Ruby exhaled with relief. "I'll come." Ruby appeared the next day, swallowed by an oversized hoodie, eyes swollen red. They sat in the kitchen, sharing slices of banana bread. Ruby whispered, "I copied how my parents treated you. I was wrong." Evelyn did not rush to embrace her, did not erase the fault with blind softness as she once might have. She simply nodded. "If you want to return, come back with truth. No pretending." Ruby's eyes shimmered and she nodded earnestly. That night, Evelyn opened her safe. Inside lay pristine new documents, will, power of attorney, trust papers, all freshly altered. Daniel, her son, had been completely removed. In his place was a single line written clearly, "Greenway Women's Shelter." Every asset would go to the shelter that had once rescued her when she was young. The shock for her family still waited in the days ahead. But in that moment, Evelyn felt her spine straighten, her gaze sharpen with new light. The story did not end with Daniel's fist pounding her door, nor with tears she might have shed. It ended with a truth both simple and thunderous. The woman once treated as invisible now held power entirely in her own hands. She had chosen, and this time, not for them, for herself. On Sunday morning, Evelyn's house lay steeped in a pale, timid light filtering through the old curtains. The oak dining table, once marked by the noise of family dinners, now sat silent, holding only a small cup of coffee and an empty plate. Evelyn sat motionless, her hands folded neatly as though to stop them from trembling. On the table, the worn folder lay open. The bold print, property transfer agreement, stabbed her eyes like a knife. $40,000, a huge portion of her lifetime savings, carved from her pension with careful hands. She had once told Daniel, "This is your chance, a home to raise your children, to build your happiness. You do not need to pay me back. Consider it a gift." His eyes had shone brightly that day. Evelyn still remembered the strong embrace after the papers were signed. But now, all that remained was a cold legal document. The house, entirely in Daniel's name. Hers was nowhere to be found. Evelyn's heart tightened. The pain spread slowly. No longer a shock, but a brutal truth. She'd become a shadow in the very home she had helped create, an outsider, an uninvited guest. In the kitchen, the clock ticked steadily. Evelyn braced her hand against the chair and rose, stepping slowly toward the metal cabinet where she stored her records. The drawer creaked open, revealing piles of papers, receipts for roof repairs, payments for heating, bills she had quietly covered so her son would not have to. Each document was an invisible cut. She closed her eyes. Memories flooded back. Daniel as a little boy, sitting by the window, legs swinging as he played with his set of building blocks. Once he had looked up, his eyes shining, and said, "Mom, one day I'll build a big house with a special room just for you." Evelyn smiled faintly at the memory, but the smile died quickly. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who turned away, a man who smirked while his wife mocked the mother who had given him everything. That night, Evelyn tossed and turned. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the bedside lamp. She could hear her heartbeat loud and heavy, each thud like a hammer. With every beat came the same questions. How can I keep living in this silence? How can I endure more averted eyes, more forced smiles, more dinners where my only role is to wipe the table clean? When the clock struck 11, Evelyn suddenly sat up. A strange determination lit her eyes. She reached for her phone and searched through her contacts until she found a name she had not spoken in years. Gloria Mitchell. An old friend from the bridge club, now retired, once a specialist in wills and estates. The phone rang. Gloria's voice, low and husky, came through. "Evelyn, it has been so long since I heard from you." Evelyn swallowed hard, trying to keep her tone steady. "I need help, about property, about what I have left." On the other end came silence, then a firm reply, "Come to my house tomorrow morning. Bring all the papers. No need to explain over the phone." For the first time in months, Evelyn slept soundly. No pills, no anxious waiting for messages that never came. Just a deep sleep, as if laying down a burden too heavy to carry any longer. The next morning, she dressed carefully in striped trousers and a crisp white blouse, fastening a black coat neatly over her shoulders. Each step of preparation felt like a ritual. Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror. The lined face of age stared back, but in her eyes glowed embers of fierce determination. "Enough," she whispered. Gloria's home smelled faintly of fresh lemon and mint. The silver-haired woman, short but sharp-eyed, welcomed Evelyn with a brief embrace. "Show me." Evelyn placed the folder on the table. Gloria opened it, flipping through each page, occasionally grunting in disapproval. After 10 minutes, she lifted her gaze. "There are no safeguards, no joint ownership. You signed it away outright. The house is theirs now." Evelyn lowered her eyes. Gloria leaned forward slowly, her voice deliberate. "But Evelyn, you still hold power. There are things they cannot touch unless you let them. Your accounts, your will, your powers of attorney. If you want, you can remove everything from their grasp." Evelyn sat still, then the faintest smile curved her lips. Not a smile of joy, but of realization, the recognition that the dagger was still in her own hand. Gloria pushed a blank sheet of paper toward her. "Where do we start, Evelyn?" Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen, but her letters were steady. She wrote, "Daniel Parker." Then, with a cold stroke, she drew a single unyielding line straight across the name. The room fell silent, a small act, yet it cracked like thunder. In her mind, Evelyn heard Melissa's mocking laugh, the cold chime of glasses raised in toasts, Daniel's indifferent gaze. All of it fused into fuel for the fire rising within her. That night, Evelyn sat alone at the kitchen table. No music, no television, only her own steady breath. Before her lay a list of tasks. Revoke power of attorney, revise the will, close joint accounts, change the locks, open accounts in her name alone. Each line written was a step forward out of the shadows. She set the pen down and closed her eyes. For the first time, Evelyn felt she was no longer a shadow haunting her own home. She was the one drawing the new boundaries. And soon, that family would have to face a completely different Evelyn, one they had never known, one they could never control again. On Wednesday afternoon, the sky was heavy and gray, mirroring the weight pressing on Evelyn's chest. She sat in her familiar kitchen, listening to the wind sweeping against the glass panes, rattling the frames like hurried knocks. On the table, Gloria's list still lay open, each black line of text sharp and precise like a command. Evelyn knew the time to begin had arrived. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel appeared. "Mom, I know Sunday was a little chaotic. Melissa didn't mean it. Please don't be upset." Evelyn stared at the screen, her lips pressed tight. For so many years, she had clung to apologies like treasures, convincing herself they are careless, not cruel. But today, her finger tapped the delete button with finality. No saving, no rereading, and ending. That evening, Evelyn left the house. A black coat draped around her shoulders, her shoes striking firm rhythms on the pavement. She walked to the locksmith's shop at the end of the street. The young man looked up and smiled faintly. "Need a lock changed, ma'am?" Evelyn nodded, her voice firm as steel. Both the front and the back doors, and 2 extra copies. An hour later, she held a new set of keys, their metallic shine glinting cold under the streetlight. When she closed the door of her house behind her, Evelyn paused in the darkness and inhaled deeply. The soft click of the new lock echoed, a small sound, but to her, it was the music of freedom. That night, she slept deeply, without the jolting start of late messages, without nightmares. For the first time, the house truly belonged to her, wrapped in a sense of safety. The next morning, Evelyn walked into the bank. Bright marble floors stretched beneath her feet, employees in tailored suits greeted politely. She approached the counter, laying down her identification card and a folder. "I want to review all accounts, especially any joint signatories." The clerk glanced at the screen, then looked up. There was one joint signatory, Mrs. Krause. Daniel Parker. Evelyn's gaze hardened. "Remove that name immediately." The clerk hesitated, fingers frozen above the keyboard. "Are you certain?" "He is listed as family," Evelyn cut in, her voice slow but ironclad. "Blood does not equal ownership. I want everything under my control, mine alone." Over an hour passed, signing forms, resetting passwords, tightening security protocols. When Evelyn finally stepped out of the bank, a stack of confirmation papers in her hands, she felt a rush of relief, not triumph, but mastery. That afternoon, Daniel appeared at her door, his posture tense and frantic. He pounded against the wood. "Mom, what are you doing?" "They told me you erased my name from the accounts." "Why? I'm your son." Evelyn sat in her armchair, staring out the window. She did not move to open the door. She did not answer. She let the pounding resound, then weaken, then fade into silence. Outside, Daniel slumped on the porch, burying his face in his hands. But Evelyn knew, if she opened the door, his words would circle back into the same tired excuses, the same manipulations, and she had already chosen. That night, Evelyn performed a task she had never dared to imagine. She rewrote her will, a clean sheet of paper, black ink, trembling but determined. The name Daniel Parker was crossed out completely. In its place, Evelyn wrote, "Greenway Women's Shelter, the refuge that had once given her safety when she was young and carrying life alone." Each stroke of the pen was like a wound, yet each stroke was also a fragment of freedom. When she set the pen down, her eyes blurred, not with tears of weakness, but with the sting of release. On Friday, another message arrived, this time not from Daniel, but from Ruby. The girl's voice trembled over the phone. "Grandma, I'm sorry. At the library that day, I pretended not to see you. I was afraid my mom would notice. But I've missed you so much. Could I come see you? Just me, no one else." Evelyn held the receiver tightly, her silence long. For years, she had longed for one honest sentence from her family. Now it came from Ruby, 16 years old, still young enough to know truth. Evelyn drew in a deep breath. "Tomorrow, after school. Only you." On the other end, Ruby exhaled in relief. "Yes, Grandma, I promise." The next morning, Evelyn prepared carefully. She baked a loaf of banana bread, the warm fragrance filling the kitchen. She set 2 cups of tea on the table, the same table that for so long had felt too wide for one, now waiting for 2. When Ruby stepped inside, thin shoulders hunched in an oversized hoodie, eyes swollen red, Evelyn felt her heart tighten. The girl sat hesitantly, tearing off a piece of bread, then burst into tears. "I was wrong, Grandma. I copied the way my parents treated you. I know it was awful." Evelyn did not rush to embrace her. She did not soften the fault away. She fixed her gaze on Ruby. "If you want to come back, you must live with truth. No pretending, no acting in someone else's play." Ruby nodded fiercely, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I promise." In the dim afternoon light, Evelyn realized perhaps one door had not yet closed. That night, she opened the safe and placed all the newly revised documents inside. She turned the key, the metallic clank sealing her decisions. Her aged hands pressed against the cold steel, but within her, a hidden flame surged. Evelyn knew the game of power had begun, and this time, she was not the pawn. She was the one commanding the board. On Tuesday afternoon, the last golden light of day stretched thin across the narrow street, glowing bright yet carrying a chill that pressed against the windows. Inside her small house, Evelyn sat quietly at the kitchen table. Before her lay the freshly revised legal documents, their white sheets lined with sharp black letters, weapons prepared for the battles still to come. She lifted her cup of tea, the steam curling in the dim air, and listened to the relentless ticking of the clock. Everything was calm, almost unnaturally so, like the air that holds its breath before a storm breaks across the horizon. The doorbell rang suddenly, loud and insistent, breaking the silence with its impatient rhythm. Evelyn rose, her heart quickening in her chest, but her breathing remained steady, anchored. She opened the door. Melissa stood there, framed by the fading light. She wore a pressed gray dress without a wrinkle, lips painted a sharp crimson, her perfume pungent and cold as steel. Each step she took into the house was marked by the staccato beat of her heels, striking the wooden floor like blows of a hammer. "We need to talk," Melissa announced, her voice clipped and commanding. Without waiting for permission, she swept inside, her presence filling the room like smoke. Evelyn closed the door slowly, her hands calm, her back straight. Melissa positioned herself in the center of the living room, arms crossed tightly, chin lifted high as though she were a judge about to deliver a verdict. "I hear you changed all your accounts," she said, her voice taut as a drawn bowstring. "And I hear you rewrote the will." Daniel is shocked. "Do you really mean to cut us off over something so small?" Evelyn lowered herself into the armchair with deliberate grace. She set her teacup on the table, the porcelain giving a faint click. "Something small?" she repeated softly, her eyes deep and unwavering. "When someone asks why I am still alive and your husband laughs in agreement, you call that small. To me, it was a knife." Melissa faltered for a breath, her lips twitching, then released a sharp laugh that cut like glass. "Every family has quarrels," she countered coldly. "If you continue this way, do not be surprised when no one cares for you anymore." She dragged out the word old, stretching it across the room like a blade meant to wound. "Care," Evelyn echoed, her voice steady, carrying the weight of decades. "I scrubbed every table. I stacked every chair. I paid the bills you both pretended not to see. I poured my pension into giving my son a home. Was that not care? And what did I receive? Contempt, mockery, silence." The room grew heavier, as though the air itself thickened between them. Melissa's fingers clenched around the strap of her purse, her tone rising, desperate, yet sharp. "Daniel still loves you," she insisted. "He is under pressure. Work has been unbearable. But you are pushing him away." Evelyn's eyes flashed, her gaze unflinching. "I lost him long ago," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "I lost him the day he stayed silent while his wife humiliated his mother. Love does not stand silent in that moment." Melissa's lips parted, but words failed. Evelyn rose, her body slender but her spine as unyielding as iron. She crossed to the cabinet, pulled out the folder, and laid it with deliberate force upon the table. "These papers are signed. Daniel's name is gone from the accounts. His name has been removed from the will. When I die, this house will be sold, and the proceeds will go directly to Greenway Women's Shelter." Her words fell like the strike of a gavel. Melissa's face drained of color, her mouth twisting. "You cannot," she began, but Evelyn cut her off with a voice like tempered steel. "I already have." A thick silence fell. The only sound that remained was the steady tick of the clock, each beat like a nail driven into the coffin of Melissa's hope. She swayed slightly, then forced her shoulders straight, pasting composure back onto her face. "If you want, I can arrange a dinner," she said stiffly. "Daniel will apologize. Everything can return to the way it was." "The way it was," Evelyn repeated, her lips curving into something sharp and final. That would mean folding away ingratitude, ironing contempt flat, tucking it neatly in a drawer and calling it peace. No, never again. Melissa's mask cracked, anger spilling out. "You will regret this. When Ruby forgets you, when Daniel abandons you, all you will have are 4 walls." Evelyn lifted her chin, her voice slow and resonant, carrying the gravity of a tolling bell. "I would rather sit alone in truth than be surrounded by contempt." The confrontation ended with the slam of the door, the lock clicking shut with finality. Evelyn stood still in the silence, listening as the space around her seemed to expand, breathing wider than it ever had. She returned the folder to the table, aligning the papers into precise order. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline, the tremor of a woman who had fought and won. That night, Evelyn did not cry. She lit a candle, its golden flame casting shadows that danced across her lined face, a face no longer bowed but lifted with pride. She opened her old notebook and wrote carefully, "Today, Melissa came like a storm. I did not shout. I did not tremble. My silence carried enough weight to change the rules of the game." She closed the notebook, placed her hand over her chest, and felt her heartbeat calm and steady. Outside, the wind carried the scent of damp leaves, cool and clean. Inside, the house no longer felt like a prison built for an unwanted shadow. It had become a fortress, and then a stage, and Evelyn, for the first time in decades, stood at the center of the light. She was no longer an observer, no longer a supporting role. She was the lead, and she had chosen the script of her own life. On Thursday morning, pale sunlight filtered through the old curtains, casting a cold glow across the kitchen. Evelyn sat before a cup of coffee, her thin hands gripping the porcelain handle. She knew Daniel would come today. Melissa would never accept defeat alone. And just as she sensed, near noon the familiar sound of a car engine rumbled at the gate. Daniel stepped onto the porch in a rush, his shirt wrinkled, tie loose, his face lined with sleepless nights. He knocked on the door, not with Melissa's harsh urgency, but with a pounding rhythm, as if trying to break through the distance. "Mom!" "It's me. Open the door. We need to talk." Inside, Evelyn sat unmoving. The sound of knocking echoed through the living room, reaching even the wooden cabinet where the folder still lay. Finally, she stood, turning the key slowly. The door creaked open. Daniel stepped inside, his eyes red. "Melissa told me you erased my name from the accounts. You crossed me out of the will. Did you really do that?" Evelyn looked at him, her gaze unusually calm. "Yes. Everything has changed." Daniel stopped short, as though his last fragile hope had shattered. His voice softened, pleading. "Mom, I didn't mean it. That day we were only joking. Melissa sometimes she speaks without thinking. I just laughed because I was nervous. You understand, don't you?" Evelyn's eyes hardened like steel. "You laughed when your wife asked why your mother was still alive. That was not nervousness, that was complicity." Daniel stumbled, pacing around the room as if searching for support. "You're letting one moment destroy everything. I'm your son. I've been there for you all these years." His words trailed off, not daring to mention the pension she had given him, the bills she had quietly paid. "Been there?" Evelyn's voice sharpened. "When the roof leaked, who called the repairman? When the heater broke, who paid for the replacement? When you couldn't afford the down payment, who withdrew her retirement fund? Where were you, Daniel? You only took. And you stayed silent." Daniel turned back, his voice breaking. "You think I'm not grateful? I've tried. I have a job. I support my family. You only see what I lack." Evelyn straightened, her posture slender yet imperious. "Gratitude is not in the words you never said. It is in the actions you never took." A chair pulled out for me, a glance of respect, a moment of defense when others mocked me. You did none of that. You left me erased from my own family. The air grew heavy, pressing down like a storm. Daniel bit his lip, eyes bloodshot. "What more do you want from me? Money? Time? You already have everything. What you're doing now is punishment." Evelyn shook her head, her voice slow but ringing. "This is not punishment. This is correction. I am not taking from you. I am taking back my right to be respected, my right to exist." Daniel sank into a chair, his hands raking his hair. His voice cracked. "You've changed. I don't recognize you anymore." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes soft yet unwavering. "No, Daniel. You have never really looked at me to see who I am. Now you are seeing me for the first time." He sat silent, shoulders trembling. Outside the window, wind stirred the old oak tree, its leaves rustling like ancient whispers. Daniel looked up, his voice unsteady. "And Ruby? She wants to see you. You hold her close, but you push me away?" Evelyn paused, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. The image of Ruby in her hoodie, eyes red, surfaced in her mind. She drew a deep breath. "Ruby comes to me with truth. She does not pretend. You are different. You only come when you fear losing something." Daniel stood abruptly, his face flushed. "So everything I've done means nothing. You're choosing a shelter, a stranger's roof, over your own family." "Family is not the name on a birth certificate," Evelyn replied, her voice like a blade. "Family is where one is welcomed, where one is seen. You and your wife turned me into a stranger at my own table. Do not ask why I went looking for a different home." Daniel clenched his fists, then let them fall helplessly to his sides. "I won't beg anymore, but remember this. You have crossed me out." Evelyn's voice was calm, heavy as lead. "No, Daniel, you crossed yourself out. I only wrote the truth." He stood frozen, then turned toward the door. His shadow wavered, heavy like a man who had lost something he thought was his forever. The door closed with a low echo that resonated in Evelyn's chest. She stood still, her eyes on the empty space, her heart tightening but not breaking. That evening, she lit a candle and wrote in her journal. "Today Daniel came. He cried, pleaded, grew angry, but I did not tremble. I have chosen. I no longer wait for them to define my worth." The candlelight flickered, casting her shadow onto the wall. It was no longer the trembling outline of a forgotten mother. It was the straight silhouette of a woman who had risen, who for the first time in decades was rewriting her own role in the story of her family. Saturday morning. Thick clouds covered the sky, leaving in the air the damp smell of last night's rain. Evelyn woke earlier than usual. She sat up slowly, wrapped herself in her old worn cardigan, and looked around her silent bedroom. Everything felt so familiar that it became suffocating. The walls, the wardrobe, the curtains, all whispered the same truth, that she had stayed here too long and endured too much. Today, she decided, it was time to prepare to leave. In the kitchen, Evelyn pulled out paper and pen and began to write. This was not another list of chores, not groceries or laundry, but a plan for her own departure. She wrote each task with clear strokes: contact the real estate office, search for a new apartment, organize her belongings, keep only what is truly necessary. Every word was like a knife, slicing the invisible ropes that had bound her to years of pain and silence. At noon, Evelyn unlocked the old wooden cabinet in the hallway. The drawer creaked as it slid open, revealing a life's worth of memories. Family photographs, birthday cards, receipts from roof repairs, and heating bills she had quietly paid. She lifted each one and set it gently on the table. A photograph of Daniel at 8, grinning wide despite his missing tooth. Her hand lingered over the image, her chest tightening, before she placed it in a box labeled History. It was memory, but not baggage to carry forward. The small gift she had once saved for Ruby, candy, notebooks, bright stickers, she gathered in her hands, then dropped into a trash bag. For years, the drawer had remained full, as if waiting for visits that never came. Now it would vanish, a symbol she no longer needed to clutch. That afternoon, Evelyn dialed the number Gloria had given her. A man's voice answered promptly. "This is Charles Lindell from the real estate office. Ms. Mitchell mentioned you might want to talk." Evelyn steadied her breath. "Yes, I want to sell my house. Not this instant, but soon. I need some time to arrange things." Charles replied with calm assurance. "I'll prepare the documents. When you are ready, we can proceed immediately." She set the phone down, feeling lighter than she had in years. The house that once held her dreams now only chained her to sorrow. Evelyn understood she was not escaping, but stepping out of an invisible prison built by her own sacrifices. The next day, she visited a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of town. Teresa, the manager, greeted her warmly. The unit was on the ground floor, its windows facing south, sunlight streaming freely inside. It was not grand, but it felt warm, alive, and possible. Evelyn walked slowly through the small living room, her fingers brushing the surface of the plain wooden counter in the kitchen. It was not marble like the counters in her current home, but it carried a quiet welcome. "I'll take this one," she said without hesitation. Teresa blinked in surprise. "You don't want to think about it?" Evelyn shook her head. "I've spent my whole life thinking. Now I need to act." Back at the old house, Evelyn began sorting through everything. With a thick black marker, she drew 3 words on labels: keep, donate, discard. Into the keep box, she placed only a few precious things: the silver teapot from her wedding anniversary, the leather journal where she still wrote her thoughts, the faded photograph of her and Frank when they had just finished building the porch. They were more than objects. They were proof that she had built a life with her own hands. Into the donate box went less personal belongings: a stack of books, spare curtains, extra pans and plates. She would bring them to the church or the charity shelter. And the discard pile grew high, filled with toys Ruby never took home, the dining chairs Daniel had dismissed as old, the scarf Melissa once left behind and forgot. Evelyn gazed at them one last time before tying the bags tightly shut. When dusk arrived, her phone lit up. A message from Ruby. "Grandma, can I come Monday? I want to bring you some books." Evelyn read it slowly, her chest softening. She typed carefully, "Yes, but come because you want to, not to ease anyone else." Ruby replied almost at once, "I know. I just miss you." Evelyn smiled faintly. In this house that grew emptier each day, at least one thread of connection had not been broken. That night, Evelyn walked through the rooms as if saying farewell. The living room, where Daniel once lined up toy dinosaurs, now held only a sagging sofa. The small bedroom was covered with dust on its floral curtains. The kitchen, which had once been filled with the smell of baking bread each weekend, now held only the faint trace of tea. She pressed her palm against the wall and whispered, "Thank you, but it's time for me to go." Before bed, Evelyn opened her journal. Slowly, deliberately, her pen carved out the words, "Today I chose a new apartment. It is not large, not luxurious, but it is bright and enough for me to begin again. I will no longer sit by the window waiting for others to remember me. I will build my own table and I will open my door only to those who knock with clean hands." She closed the journal and blew out the lamp. In the darkness, Evelyn smiled. For the first time in years, sleep came to her not out of sheer exhaustion, but as a gentle gift of release. On Tuesday morning, the wind blew harder than usual, scattering the leaves of the old oak tree across the path in front of the house. Evelyn opened the window, letting the chill rush in. On the kitchen table, cardboard boxes were stacked high, each one neatly labeled: keep, discard, donate. The house that had once felt crowded now seemed hollow. Every step she took echoing like footsteps in a stranger's room. She began in the living room. The old rug beneath her feet was frayed at the edges. The same rug where Daniel had once sprawled out to watch cartoons, now covered in dust. Evelyn rolled it tightly, tied it with rope, and set it aside. On the wall hung a landscape painting she had bought with her very first paycheck, its frame faded with time. She touched it gently and whispered, "You will come with me." She placed it into the keep box, a fragment proving she had once lived a life of her own before she was only a mother. Evelyn moved into the hallway. The tall wooden cabinet, once a hiding place for candies she kept for Ruby, now stood empty. Only the musty scent of old wood lingered. She locked it, marked it donate, and turned away. Someone else might find use for it, but she no longer needed it. In the master bedroom, she opened the wardrobe. Old work dresses hung limp, faded with time. There was the suit she had worn to Daniel's wedding, the wool scarf Frank had given her on their very first Christmas together as husband and wife. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, held the scarf to her face, inhaling the faint smell of wool. Her eyes blurred, yet she carefully placed it into the keep box. Some memories could not be surrendered. By afternoon, her neighbor Kay appeared at the door with a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. "Do you need some help?" she asked warmly. Evelyn smiled and invited her in. Together they wrapped dishes, packed books, dusted shelves. Kay talked about her mischievous cat that always hid under the porch. Evelyn listened, even chuckled at times, the sound of her laughter echoing in the house, strange and unfamiliar after so many years of silence. When the sun went down, Kay left. Evelyn stood staring at the growing tower of boxes, feeling both relief and emptiness. She sank into her armchair, watching the room fade into shadow. Suddenly, an image of Daniel at 10 flashed before her eyes, sitting in that very spot, proudly showing her a test paper with a bright red A. Evelyn brushed away a tear and whispered, "That little boy, I still remember him. But the man he became is no longer that child." The next day, Evelyn tackled the kitchen. She pulled jars of spices from the shelf, cinnamon, star anise, vanilla extract, things that had once filled the house with sweetness when she baked. She saved a few that were unopened, the rest she threw away. In a lower cupboard, she discovered the kitchen scale Frank had given her for their 10th anniversary. Rust clung to its edges, yet she polished it carefully and placed it into the keep box. It was not just an object, but proof of a time when love had been real. Later that afternoon, Ruby arrived, a backpack slung over her shoulder, a stack of books in her arms. "Grandma, I brought you some novels for you to read when you move." Evelyn smiled, her eyes moist as she accepted them. They sat together among the boxes, sorting and talking. Ruby chattered about school, her friends, a teacher who stammered. Evelyn listened, her heart softening. Before leaving, Ruby took her grandmother's hand. "I'll visit often. Please don't think you're alone." Evelyn squeezed her small fingers gently. "As long as you come in truth, I will always open the door." That night, Evelyn walked down the darkened hallway, her fingers brushing against the wall. Every scratch, every patch of peeling paint was a witness to time. She reached Daniel's old room and opened the door. The curtain patterned with sailboats still hung, coated with dust. In the corner of the closet sat a shoebox labeled private. Evelyn laid her hand on it but did not open it. Some memories were better left untouched. She placed it back and murmured, "Past, stay where you are." Before going to bed, Evelyn stepped out onto the back porch. The old apple tree leaned crookedly, its branches broken, yet it still bloomed faithfully each spring. She remembered the day Daniel, at 9, had climbed it and gotten stuck. She had run barefoot to fetch a ladder, hauling him down while he cried into her arms, begging her not to tell anyone. Evelyn smiled bitterly. The apple tree remained, but that tenderness had long since withered. Inside, she opened her journal. Her hand trembled slightly, but her words were firm. "I have packed most of my belongings. Each item I let go is a burden lifted from my shoulders. I do not regret it. I only regret it took so many years to see I could choose to let go. This house has taught me everything, but it can no longer hold me." The bedside lamp cast a dim golden light, outlining her upright figure, her eyes clear and determined. Outside, the wind rattled the branches, carrying the cold night air. Inside, however, Evelyn's heart glowed with warmth. For the first time, she felt she was not just preparing to move houses, but to step into a different life, one where she could finally decide who would be let in and who would be left behind. On the morning of the move, the sky was gray, a thin drizzle falling like a veil over the street. Evelyn woke before dawn, sitting at the bare wooden table, listening to the ticking clock counting down. The house echoed with emptiness, every step producing a hollow sound, as if it had long since ceased to belong to her. She dressed in a white blouse, dark trousers, and a thick cardigan. Slowly, she walked through each room, her eyes lingering. On the living room wall, a pale mark remained where the family portrait once hung. In the kitchen, the spice rack was stripped bare, the scent of baked goods surviving only in memory. The bedroom stood silent. Blankets folded with the neatness of a hotel ready for checkout. At exactly 9 o'clock, a truck pulled up at the gate. 2 young movers greeted her, surprised at the small number of boxes. "I sorted everything," Evelyn said, her voice light but firm. They carried the cartons, tape crackling, while rain tapped rhythm on the roof. Each box leaving through the door felt like a memory being carried away, quiet and without resistance. She paused in the hallway where Daniel's height had once been marked. Fresh paint now covered the wall, but under the slanted light, faint grooves still showed. Evelyn laid her palm against them, warmth rising briefly in her chest. Then she let go. The past had been touched, but did not need to be held. In Daniel's old room, the box labeled private still sat in the closet. She opened it to find baseball cards and a scrap of paper scribbled with the words, "I love you, Mom." Tears welled, but she wiped them quickly. The box was returned to its place. "Memories stay," she whispered, "but chains do not." At the back porch, the old apple tree leaned crookedly, bark rough, fresh buds sprouting. Evelyn remembered when her son, at 9, had been trapped in its branches, how she had run barefoot with a ladder, pulling him down as his heart raced against hers like a storm. The tree still blossomed, but the boy had gone far away. "The tree remains," she murmured with a smile, "but I go." In the hallway drawer, she left behind an envelope, a single key, and a note that read, "This house taught me everything. Thank you." It was not for anyone else, but for her own heart. When the front door closed and the key turned in the lock, the sound was sharp and final. Evelyn did not look back. She stepped down the stoop, rain kissing her hair. The truck rolled forward. Through the window, she watched the trees, the corner shop, the park where Ruby once laughed until she cried, all flashing past like fragments of an old film. Evelyn breathed deeply. The sorrow no longer cut. It lay soft and quiet, like smooth stones under water. The new red brick apartment building soon appeared, compact and calm. Teresa, the manager, greeted her with a warm smile. 1B is ready. The hall smelled faintly of fresh paint. Inside, the small apartment had white walls and south-facing windows. Sunlight poured across the tiled floor, brightening everything. The movers stacked boxes where she pointed. Evelyn opened the first, lifting out the silver teapot, and set it on the sunny kitchen counter. Next came the photograph of her and Frank painting the porch, faces smeared, smiles wide as summer. Hung on the wall, it instantly turned the blank space into a story. She spread a checkered cloth across the table, placed 2 cups, one for herself, the other left empty. Steam rose, filling the room with the fragrance of tea. Though new, the apartment began to feel alive. The doorbell rang. Ruby stood there, hoodie damp with rain, holding a small box. "Grandma," she beamed, her eyes bright. "I brought cookies and a drawing." They sat on the floor among the boxes. Ruby opened the box to reveal a pencil sketch, a woman seated at a chessboard, only 2 pieces left, yet holding the winning move. "I thought of you like this," Ruby whispered. Evelyn traced the lines with her fingertip, throat tightening. She pulled the girl into her arms, the scent of rain and vanilla mingling gently. They ate cookies and sipped tea. Ruby talked about school, her volunteer group at the shelter, her plan to save money for a second-hand bike. Evelyn listened, nodding, sometimes laughing softly. Those small bursts of laughter on a late afternoon filled with golden light were enough to chase away shadows that had followed her for years. When Ruby left, Evelyn stepped onto the balcony. The rain had stopped, and a faint pink streak colored the sky. Below, a boy wobbled on his first bike without training wheels, his father walking beside him, arms ready to catch. Evelyn watched, and for once did not ache. New cycles of life were beginning, and she no longer stood on the margins. That evening, she baked a loaf of banana bread. Sweetness drifted through the apartment, clinging to curtains and walls like a gentle claim of ownership. She cut a slice and ate slowly, not needing anyone to praise it. The feeling was not triumph, but deep steadiness, like a boat finding its harbor. Before bed, Evelyn opened her journal. Her pen moved with calm certainty. Today I left the old house. I did not look back. Not from anger, but because enough is enough. This apartment is small, but it is mine. I brewed tea, hung a picture, opened the window, and let the wind call my name. She set down the pen and turned off the lamp. Darkness settled soft as velvet. The old play had ended. The curtain was lifting. This time, the one writing the script was me. On Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of the new apartment, painting golden streaks across the tiled floor. Evelyn sat on a wooden chair, holding a cup of tea, gazing at the modest room that was slowly beginning to breathe with her presence. The checkered tablecloth, the silver teapot, the old photograph hanging neatly on the wall. The space was small but peaceful. No more false laughter, no more averted eyes. This was a place where she was seen, at least by herself. A knock sounded at the door. Ruby appeared, pale blue hoodie, backpack slipping off one shoulder. In her hands, she carried a clear plastic box filled with chocolate chip cookies. "Grandma, I baked these last night. They're not as good as yours, but I wanted you to try them." Evelyn opened the lid, the sweet aroma rising, and smiled warmly. "They're good because they have your sweetness in them." They sat at the small table together. Ruby grabbed one cookie at once, crumbs scattering across her sweatshirt. She chattered about school, a half-rehearsed play, a math teacher who always forgot chalk, then burst into giggles. Evelyn listened, feeling as if the room itself was lit with the sound of youth. When the conversation quieted, Ruby's eyes grew serious. "Dad's angry. He says you cut him off out of spite. Mom says you're selfish. But I don't think so. I think you're just choosing again." Evelyn remained silent for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I've waited my whole life to choose once for myself." Ruby lowered her head, her voice soft. "I'm sorry for pretending not to see you. At the library, at the supermarket, I was afraid Mom would scold me. But when I walked past you like a stranger, it hurt so much inside." Evelyn took her hand, the old fingers firm and warm. "What matters is not that you turned away once, but that today you came back. Just don't repeat it." Ruby nodded, tears brimming. That afternoon, they opened a box of belongings. Ruby pulled out old photographs. One showed Daniel as a boy, grinning wide with a gap in his teeth while playing with Lego. Ruby studied it, whispering, "Dad was once that sweet?" Evelyn smiled sadly. "Yes." He held my hand tightly crossing the street. "I adored that boy. But when he grew, he forgot how to hold on." Ruby was quiet, her eyes glistening. Late in the evening, Ruby left, promising to return next week. Evelyn stood on the balcony watching her granddaughter's figure fade into the street, her heart sinking but no longer heavy. She knew the true bond was slowly being tied again, not by duty, but by choice. The next day, the phone rang, Daniel's voice hoarse. "Mom, can we meet? I want to explain." Evelyn listened, her chest weighted with stone. She answered simply, "Not now." Daniel paused, then hung up. Evelyn set the phone down with a sigh. She did not hate her son, but she had stopped waiting. On Tuesday afternoon, Kay the neighbor arrived carrying homemade bread and jam. They drank tea together while Kay talked about the cat that kept hiding under her roof. Evelyn chuckled. "If it comes here, I'll share a corner of my balcony." Laughter filled the apartment, warm and genuine, needing no blood ties, only the honesty of neighborly care. That evening, Evelyn opened her journal. She wrote, "Ruby came. We ate cookies, told stories." She admitted her mistake. "I feel hope, not for the old family, but for the new generation." Daniel called, but I would not open the door for belated remorse. I am no longer the one knocking to be seen. I am the one holding the key. On Thursday, Ruby returned with a small oil painting, 2 chairs on a porch, one empty, one with a teacup resting. "Keep this, Grandma. It's your new porch," she said. Evelyn hung it beside the photograph of Frank. Past and present now stood together, not competing but harmonizing. That weekend, Evelyn joined a book club at the nearby library. She listened to new friends, sometimes offering comments. Afterward, they invited her for coffee. She agreed. Sitting in the cafe, hearing conversations around her, Evelyn realized she no longer felt out of place. The silence that had pressed on her for years was cracking, letting light in. That night, Ruby called, her voice bright. "Grandma, Kay's cat just had 3 kittens. Mom won't let me keep them, but I'll come over to help take care of them at your place." Evelyn laughed. "My balcony's ready. We'll set up a basket." Their laughter rang, not the forced laughter of old family dinners, but pure and honest. Later that night, Evelyn sat alone, looking at her apartment filling with new mementos, the silver teapot, the photograph, Ruby's painting, Kay's flowers. Everything was simple, yet each piece carried warmth. She sipped her tea, breathing out with relief. For the first time, she felt that a house was not just a shelter, but a place to live. Before bed, she wrote, "They once asked why I am still alive. Today I have the answer. I live to be seen, to sit at my own table, to offer a chair to those who come with truth. Ruby has come, Kay has come, and I finally have come back to myself." The lamp cast a soft glow across her face. The wrinkles no longer seemed only scars of sorrow, but marks of strength. Evelyn closed the journal and shut her eyes. In her dream, the balcony overflowed with sunlight. Ruby sketched by the railing, Kay laughed over a cup of tea, and a small kitten played at her feet. That was family, not because of blood, but because of choice. On Friday morning, the sky stretched open, blue and clear after days of relentless rain. Sunlight slipped through the window of the small apartment, painting pale gold across the tiled floor. Evelyn rose before dawn, brewed a pot of tea, and set the cup in front of her. On the table lay a neat stack of documents, her updated will, transfer papers, and an unsent letter in her careful hand. They were more than papers. They were proof that she had closed the final chapter of the life that had once chained her. Near noon, Daniel arrived unannounced. His knock was soft, hesitant. When Evelyn opened the door, she saw a man worn thin, his hair unkempt, his shirt wrinkled, shadows heavy under his eyes. "Mom," he murmured, "I only want to see you." Without a word, she stepped aside. Inside, Daniel glanced around uneasily. He noticed Ruby's sketch pinned on the wall, the photograph of his father, and rows of books neatly arranged. Everything spoke of a new life his mother had built without him, and he seemed unsettled. He sat stiffly, fingers locked together. "I didn't come for money," he began. "I came to say sorry. That day I laughed because I was weak." Melissa stared. "I didn't know what to do. I let you take the shame. I failed." His voice cracked. Evelyn studied him, not with anger, not with indulgence. She remained silent, letting each word fall heavy. "I remember," Daniel whispered, "when I was stuck in the apple tree and you carried me down. You promised no one would know. I believed you were my safe place, yet I grew and turned you into someone invisible. I don't know how to fix it." His shoulders shook, his head bowed. Evelyn sighed softly, eyes glistening. "Some doors, Daniel, once closed, cannot open as before. We can't go back, but we can choose how to go forward. You haven't lost me. You've lost the right to take me for granted." He lifted his eyes, blurred with tears, but she raised her hand gently. "I will listen. But forgiveness is not immediate. It takes truth and time." The silence lingered. Daniel stood slowly, glanced again around the modest apartment, and left without another word. Evelyn neither stopped him nor called after him. When the door shut, she exhaled, her heart lighter. She no longer carried anger, yet she had not forgiven. She had only placed things in their rightful place. That afternoon, Ruby came with a paper bag. "Grandma, I brought tulips for the table." Evelyn arranged them in a vase, their red blossoms glowing like fire in the small room. Ruby spoke about her plan to volunteer at the shelter. "I want to do what you once did, help people with no home." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with pride. That evening, Kay and 2 friends from the book circle joined her for tea. They brought fruit and pastries, their laughter filling every corner of the apartment. No one spoke Daniel's name, no one asked about the house she had left. Instead, they talked about daily things: grocery prices, a neighbor's cat, books they loved. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt she belonged to a room alive with warmth. When the guests departed, she washed the cups and put everything in place. On the table remained only the vase of tulips and an empty plate. Evelyn looked at them and felt a quiet peace. This was no longer the table where she had been ignored. This was her table, where people came with sincerity, not obligation. That night she wrote in her journal, "Daniel came in tears. I listened, but I did not forgive. Ruby came with tulips, and I saw the future in her. Friends came with laughter, and I found family there. I no longer ask why I live. I live to answer myself." The next morning, she walked around the neighborhood. Children chased a ball in the yard, women watered flowers, an elderly woman waved from her balcony. Evelyn returned the greeting with a smile. The world had always kept turning, and now she was moving with it, no longer trapped at the edge. At noon, she baked banana bread and carried half to Kay. They sat together with tea, steam curling from their cups. Kay observed, "You laugh more now." Evelyn replied, "I've found my laughter again." They touched cups, sharing presents instead of promises. That evening, Ruby called, her voice brimming with energy. "Grandma, I was accepted into the summer program. They want me to lead a reading for children. Will you come with me?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. A new circle was forming, one rooted in choice and kindness. Before bed, Evelyn wrote once more. "Someday Daniel may return with truly clean hands, and I will listen, but I will not wait. I have Ruby, I have Kay, I have myself. I have set the table, and for the first time, I sit in my rightful chair." She closed the book and turned off the lamp. The apartment sank into gentle dark, no longer echoing with old loneliness. Outside, a breeze carried the cool scent of night. Inside, peace spread wide within her, like a meadow after years of wandering in thick forest. She knew the road ahead still wound far, but the most important battle had already been won. She had reclaimed herself. There are stories that break us, not with noise, but with silence. Evelyn left a house where she had been trapped in neglect and humiliation to create a table of her own. At this table, she no longer waited for permission, no longer endured indifferent glances. She poured tea with steady hands and welcomed only those who came with truth. Her story is not hers alone. It belongs to anyone who has been dismissed or pushed aside in the very place meant to feel like home. It teaches us that silence, when prolonged, becomes complicity. There comes a moment when we must rise, reclaim our voice, and demand the respect that is rightfully ours. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, remember you can step away from false pretenses and build something genuine. If you have seen others endure unfairness, speak out because your voice may be the light they need. Share this story if you believe in the power of truth and dignity. And above all, never forget, you deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to sit at the table of your own making.